H. Budget rollout briefings. 1. In general. Beginning not later than 30 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, each of the Secretaries of the military departments, the Commander of United States Cyber Command, and the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defense shall provide annual updates to the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and the Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives on activities undertaken and progress made to carry out this section. 2. Annual briefings. Not later than 1 year after the date of the enactment of this Act and not less frequently than annually thereafter until January 1, 2024. The Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, the Chief Information Officer, and the Joint Staff J6, representing the combatant commands, shall individually or together provide briefings to the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and the Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives on activities undertaken and progress made to carry out this section. I. Implementation. 1. In general, in implementing this section, the Secretary of Defense shall prioritize the cybersecurity and cyber defense of defense critical assets and task critical assets and shape cyber investments, policy, operations, and deployments to ensure cybersecurity and cyber defense. 2. Application. This section shall apply to assets owned and operated by the Department of Defense, as well as to applicable non-department assets essential to the projection, support, and sustainment of military forces and operations worldwide. J. Definition. In this section. 1. Mission-relevant terrain in cyberspace. Mission-relevant terrain in cyberspace has the meaning given such term as specified in Joint Publications 6-0. 2. Operational technology. The term operational technology means control systems or controllers, communication architectures, and user interfaces that monitor or control infrastructure and equipment operating in various environments, such as weapon systems, utility or energy production and distribution, or medical, logistics, nuclear, biological, chemical, or manufacturing facilities. Sec. 1506. Matters concerning cyber personnel requirements. A. In general. The Secretary of Defense, acting through the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness and the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defense, in consultation with Secretaries of the military departments and the head of any other organization or element of the department the Secretary determines appropriate, shall 1. Determine the overall workforce requirement of the Department for Cyberspace and Information Warfare military personnel across the active and reserve components of the armed forces, other than the Coast Guard, and for civilian personnel, and in doing so shall, a. Consider personnel in positions securing the Department of Defense Information Network and associated enterprise information technology, defense agencies and field activities, and combatant commands. Including current billets primarily associated with the Department of Defense Cyber Workforce Framework. B. Consider the mix between military and civilian personnel, active and reserve components, and the use of the National Guard. C. Develop a talent management strategy that covers accessions, training, and education. And D. Consider such other elements as the Secretary determines appropriate. 2. Assess current and future cyber education curriculum and requirements for military and civilian personnel, including a. Acquisition personnel, b. Accessions and recruits to the military services, c. Cadets and midshipmen at the military service academies and enrolled in the Senior Reserve Officers Training Corps. D. Information environment and cyberspace military and civilian personnel. And E. Non-information environment cyberspace military and civilian personnel. 3. Identify appropriate locations for information warfare and cyber education for military and civilian personnel, including a. The military service academies, b. The senior level service schools and intermediate level service schools specified in Section 2151, b. of Title 10, United States Code, c. the Air Force Institute of Technology, d. the National Defense University, e. the Joint Special Operations University, f. the Command and General Staff Colleges, g. the War Colleges, h. any military education institution attached to or operating under any institution specified in this paragraph, I. any other military educational institution of the department identified by the Secretary for purposes of this section. J. The Cyber Centers of Academic Excellence, and K. Potential future educational institutions of the federal government in accordance with the assessment required under subsection B. And 4. Determine a. whether the cyberspace domain mission requires a graduate-level professional military education college on par with and distinct from the war colleges for the Army, Navy, and Air Force as in existence on the day before the date of the enactment of this Act. B. whether such a college should be joint, and c. where such a college should be located. B. Assessment. In identifying appropriate locations for information warfare and cyber education for military and civilian personnel at potential future educational institutions of the federal government pursuant to subsection A. 3K, the Secretary of Defense, acting through the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness and the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defense, in consultation with secretaries of the military departments, the head of any other organization or element of the department the Secretary determines appropriate, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the National Cyber Director, shall assess the feasibility and advisability of establishing a National Cyber Academy or similar institute for the purpose of educating and training civilian and military personnel for service in cyber, information, and related fields throughout the federal government. C. Reports required. 1. Education. Not later than November 1, 2022, the Secretary of Defense shall provide the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and the Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives a briefing and, not later than January 1, 2023, the Secretary shall submit to such committees a report on a talent strategy to satisfy future cyber education requirements at appropriate locations referred to in subsection A. 3, and b. the findings of the Secretary in assessing cyber education curricula and identifying such locations. 2. Workforce. Not later than November 1, 2024, the Secretary of Defense shall provide the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and the Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives a briefing and, not later than January 1, 2025, the Secretary shall submit to such committees a report on a. the findings of the Secretary in determining pursuant to subsection A. 1. The overall workforce requirement of the Department of Defense for cyberspace and information warfare military personnel across the active and reserve components of the armed forces, other than the Coast Guard, and for civilian personnel. B. Such recommendations as the Secretary may have relating to such requirement, and c. such legislative or administrative action as the Secretary identifies as necessary to effectively satisfy such requirement. D. Education described.